But let me just start by saying my name is Fred Stevens, and I'm with the Arcadia Music Club, and here happily to spend a few minutes with Mr. Dick Jenkins from the class of '55.
Right.
An original Apache here at Arcadia High School. So when did you start at Arcadia High?
We started at September '51.
1951?
Yeah. We didn't have a mascot name.
You didn't?
No. So the big fight was whether we were going to be the Spartans or the Apaches. And some of the guys wanted Spartans, but the girls said, we can do more with feathers than we can with shields, and so we became the Apaches. And we wrote to the Apache Nation and asked permission to use them as mascots. And they wrote back and said we would be honored. And we told them that the drill team was going to be called the Tom Tom Girls. And they said, well, don't buy any Tom Toms. And they made the original Tom Toms, the Apache Nation did, and sent them over here with real beaters. And so they had authentic Apache equipment.
Wow. Wow. So where was the school located?
Well, we were at First Avenue School. The football field for us at that time, when we had a football, we had freshman football. And I didn't play, of course, because I was in the band. But the football field was the outfield of the Arcadia County Park baseball field. It made a wonderful field. And the band played before the games. And we had somebody found a cannon, an 18-inch cannon. It made a lot of noise. And we anchored it on the sidelines, and for the national anthem, we tied it down because it would move. And we'd have a drum roll, a cannon, and then I'd direct the band in the national anthem. Yeah.
So you led the band that first year?
Yes. And the most important thing that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned today is a man by the name of Frank Largent. And Frank Largent was our first band director. And whoever decided that, and I have no idea how that happened, was a genius, because Largent was intelligent, he was a leader, he was innovative, and he was a visionary. And he changed the way a band ought to look on the street. He was a good disciplinarian, but showmanship was his stock in trade. And we were a small band.
How many?
I would have to say we were probably that year maybe 50.
Okay.
45 or 50. The second thing I wanted to make sure everybody knew is that there were real musicians in that band. I'm not one of those. I was a snare drummer and I just kind of got by, but there were real musicians in that band. And Largent saw this and he said he could make a band out of this because these people could play multiple instruments. We had a gal that played the flute and the piccolo in the band and the violin in the orchestra. And by the way, the orchestra was very, very good in those days, almost ahead of the band. But Largent saw this opportunity to make a difference. He created a cart with bicycle wheels, and they attached timpanis, 2 timpanis to this cart. And they were pulled by 2 Indian princesses. And the person that played the timpani was a gal by the name of Marilyn Basford, and she was a cellist in the orchestra. And after 8 measures of drum cadence, there would be a cymbal crash, and then she would play 8 measures solo on the timpani. And out in front of that was a big banner that said Arcadia, not as sophisticated as the one that's there now. But it was fascinating how he made this thing go from the very beginning.
So it was a real show performance.
Yeah, everybody knew about Arcadia after we'd been there. If we were in a parade, people knew Arcadia had been there. And some of the guys in the band came up with the idea that when we called the band to attention, they would lift the right foot up, come over and put it down and yell Apache. That started in 1953. The fall of '53 we started that. They decided there was a way to do an about face with kicking your legs, but we tried that and discarded it. It didn't look right. The other thing we had was, for a small band, we had great section leaders, fabulous section leaders. And they went on, a lot of them went on to be musicians and made their living from music. I remember Mike Cambites. I just looked him up again on the internet. He lists him as a retired high school band director and a member of the San Jose Wind Symphony. And he played several instruments. One of the section leaders was a guy named Chuck Berghofer, and if you talk to jazz musicians or jazz aficionados, they know his name. When he got out of high school, he got a string bass. We played sousaphone and trombone in the band, string bass in the orchestra, and he took a string bass all over the world. He toured with Skinny Ennis and Frank Sinatra. He was a section leader. We had strong people, very strong people, and we had discipline.
Wow.
And that made a difference. I think we started with no talking in the band room on a day of an event. Couldn't talk. Get your instruments on the bus. Of course, you could talk on the bus. When we got where we were going, there was no talking. You got your instruments. You went over, the section leaders lined them up. I was in front of the band. One of the section leaders was the front row right guy, Bob Randall, 6 feet 4 inches tall, a trombonist. And he had the guys shaped. You're not going to argue with a guy 6 feet 4. And he had the front row lined up. They're great guys. You mentioned Richard Benson.
Yes.
Dave Caprone, who's a world-renowned winemaker now. That front row was special trombones. And Bob Randall's a retired Navy captain. Spent 33 years in the Navy. Anyway, ask me anything you want to ask. I mean.
Well, you were the drum major.
Yes.
So what was it like for you becoming drum major?
Terrible.
Terrible?
Yeah. Frank Largent, I'd never been to Arcadia till I moved up here just before school started, so I didn't know anybody. And he checked up on me and said, you were in a boys band in San Diego. He said, were you a drummer? And I said, yeah. He said, were you a drum major? And I said, no, but I watched him practice. He said, well, here. And he gave this little tiny baton. And I was 13 years old. And, we learned together. The band learned together, the section leaders learned together, and I certainly learned. That year we actually marched in the All-Western Band Review.
Yes.
And the band looked pretty good. I did not score very well. One of the section leaders was my harshest critic, best friend, and best man at our wedding 57 years ago, Bill Black. He's no longer with us, but he was a real drummer. He was a great rudimentary drummer. And at the end of the first year, in 52, I said to Frank Largent, I said, you can have this back. And he said, okay. And they had Janelle Dysart become the drum. They called her a drum majorette. Now she'd be a drum major.
What instrument did she play? Did she play an instrument? What?
Yes, but I can't remember what she played. And she wore a full Indian headdress, and she really looked good out there. And the one thing I did not know at the time, in our second year, was that Frank Largent was only going to be there for 2 years. And so we marched at All-Western. We marched at Huntington Beach and the Huntington Beach Band Review. And the uniform company had not gotten a hat to shake us to us, so we marched bareheaded. We won first place in our division in sweepstakes.
Wow. That
was really fun. And so at the end of I think it was in the spring of 53. Yeah, she was 52, 53. In the spring of 53, Frank Largent put a notice on the band room window. He had this office with glass. There's going to be open tryouts and competition for drum major. And my harshest critic and best friend, Bill Black, came to me and said, you got to do it. And then he said, and get some help. So I did. One of the guys was a brother of one of our band members. He was older. He was at Pomona College at the time. He'd been drum major of Monrovia, Arcadia, Duarte High School. Now that's where everybody in Arcadia went to Monrovia, Arcadia, Duarte, MAD, until we were able to get a unified school system and have a high school.
Yes.
So I called him on the phone, and he said he'd help me. He said, I've got a long driveway and you're going to wear a groove in it. And I did. And so we had the tryouts and I won. And instead of a small baton, Frank Largent, one of the last things he did was hand me a mace, a full drum major's mace. And I used that in the 52 or 53, 54 school years. And we did very well that year and we had no seniors. There were no senior class then.
Yes.
My class was still juniors. And it was very interesting how that worked. We marched against big name school bands. In San Diego County, they have Helix and Grossmont in those days. Montebello was always tough for us. We always had a tough time with Montebello. They were very good. Bakersfield Drillers. They had sousaphones with nets over, and they spilled out drillers. And the Merced Marching 100 was another band. There were a lot of bands. Now, All Western Band Review, I used to think it was like 60 bands or something. I got on the internet at 75, 79 bands.
Yes.
It was a big deal. We, that year, finished, I think, in the top 5 of our division. Still, you know, that's pretty good for freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. And we went back to Huntington Beach, and I have this under discipline. The section leaders exhibited discipline and enforced discipline and had everybody in their charge doing what they're supposed to do. Well, discipline paid off and practice because the Southern California School Band and Orchestra judges, they inspect the band. We stood inspection, they inspect the band, and then this guy comes over to me and says, Arcadia, move it up to the line and be ready. So we moved up to the line and we were ready. And there's another guy, the starter, and he said those magic words way too soon, I think. He said, take it away, Arcadia. Now I turned around and there was a group of real small children in this parade. And they were taking steps about this long. And I knew at 122 beats a minute and 30 in steps, we were going to walk right over them.
Yeah.
So I fiddled around, and then he said, take it away, Arcadia. And he meant it. And I knew he had this clipboard. You know, he could deduct points before we even played our first note for not following directions. So I started the band. And I could see this is not going to work. So we got down near the reviewing stand, and I stopped the band. Later, I was told by parents and people who were watching, the band stopped just like the Marines. Bam, they stopped. There was no accordion. I couldn't tell exactly from where I was. This is all at night in the cold and damp beach weather down there at Huntington Beach. And I'm dying. We're in front of the reviewing stand playing our march, and they're just going like this. These judges are looking at us, and I figured, this is terrible. But I didn't want to start them until I was sure that they, you know, stop them once, it could be their fault. Stop them twice, it's my fault. So I started them finally, we finished the parade, and we went down to the auditorium, wherever it was, for the awards. And fortunately, it was an old building. There were some pillars there I could hide behind. But we won division. We were first in our division, won the sweepstakes trophy.
Congratulations.
Boy, I feel pretty good about that. And then we marched in the first ever West Arcadia Merchants Band Review. That's what it was called in the old days.
Yes, the West Arcadia Band Review.
Merchants Band Review.
And today we call it the Arcadia Festival of Bands.
Right. And, you know, we were the host band, so you can't compete. But the judges always gave us a score sheet, and we did very well.
Fantastic.
And, after that year we marched at Temple City, and we won a sweepstakes there. Azusa, Alhambra, we marched around in a lot of places, and we won a lot of trophies. And
Dick, if I could just interrupt you for a minute, there's somebody in the room that I want you to meet. You were the first drum major at Arcadia High School. I'd like you to meet Tammy Tang, who is our current drum major. Tammy, come on up here and meet Dick.
hello
Nice to
there.
meet you. Hello. Sure.
Come on in, have a seat.
And I think it's an opportunity for maybe you, if you have something you want to ask of the first drum major, or the first drum major, if you have something you want to ask of the current drum major.
Well, I kind of just wanted to know what it was like for you as drum major, all the way back then.
Well, it probably was a lot different because of the kind of drum majors that we were. I was telling Fred, they gave me a mace, which is, what a mace looks like.
Yes, quite different, yeah.
And I had to have a rubber pad on my hand, and I have small bones, and it was tough. But if you watch, and I guess what they called this in those days was military drum majors. And if you watch the Marines, I think the Marine band is about as good as it gets in terms of how they step and they keep the beat. And they're not a lot of musicians, but they're good musicians. And the difference with you people now is you do much more with the baton. I don't know what you call that shortened baton.
We just call them batons.
Yeah. And you do much more, and you're much more athletic. And the only difference between me and a band member in uniform is I wore a cape on my left shoulder. The uniform company sent them along in hopes we'd all wear them. And nobody wanted them, and so the director said, why don't you wear it? At least we can tell where you are. And so I had this cape that hung down. And but you are dressed much more finely than we were, and I'm sure you're much more skilled with your hands than any of us were.
I'm sure that's not true.
But I will say one thing about the band directors. There were two of them. The second band director was a guy named Manly Wood, and he would come up to me at a parade and he'd say, "Okay, you got it. I'm going to march with the junior high school band." And the parents said, "Well, he really trusts you." And I said, "No, he trusts the band."
Yeah. Excuse me, we want to adjust that microphone.
Oh, okay.
Now, how are you selected?
Well, I had to go through a sort of audition around the end of my junior year. It was around in two parts. So the first part, they tested my spinning skills, my performance skills, basically my routine that I would perform in front of the band. And then the second part, it was part conducting and part interview. So they tested my conducting to see how I would do it for field shows, and then they interviewed me to kind of get a feel for my leadership style. And so, yeah.
Well, you know where the gymnasium is.
Yeah.
If you look on the southeast corner of the gymnasium, there's double doors there. And the people who are going to try out for drum major, there's no interviews. This is really different than you people have it refined down there in Nat's eyebrow. But those doors are open, and each person gets to select a march that they want to demonstrate when they're in competition. And I chose High School Cadets by Sousa, and it's all done on a reel-to-reel tape. And we're in uniform and everything, but you go in and march around, do the signals and the drills and things, and that's it. I would say probably 10 minutes. But people had worked hard to get there, but not as refined as you people.
Yeah. Well, they added in the field shows like a little bit later, so it was a thing. I also wanted to ask, what was your favorite part about being a drum major, or just like one specific memory from your time as a drum major?
I would say that every time I made a mistake, the band covered for me. They did exactly what they would take my mistake and make a maneuver. I remember in Monrovia, some guy went like this. We're supposed to turn down this street. So I turned the band, and we're walking along, and there's nobody around. We're on the wrong street. So I just turned around. We made it look like a maneuver. The band did what they were. Those guys would walk through a wall, if you didn't stop them.
Yeah.
And I think that was the best part of it. They made me look good, like I knew what I was doing.
Must have been nice.
And I also have to say that they showed great discipline. And that made me feel quite well. I had been in a band in San Diego that was very disciplined, a boys' band. And in fact, I told Fred that we'd marched in the All-Western Band Review as freshmen. Now, we had some 8th graders with us because we had to expand the band. And everybody kind of felt like, you know, we're real young and everything. But I told some of the band members, I said, this band I was in San Diego are all the same age, 125-piece band. They were a boys' band, they weren't a school band, and they won a sweepstakes that year. And that's the last year they were allowed to march. After that, it was all school bands. But I think the fact that the members of the band themselves had such discipline made it so easy. It was just easy.
Thank you. Maybe.
Well, maybe you could talk a little bit, even for Tammy's sake, about how being in the band affected you the rest of your life.
I think the discipline of, you know, rehearsing, repetition, I think that stayed with me. I know in law school I was married, had a child. I worked all day and went to night law school. And I think being in the band gave me that discipline to be more orderly, and I enjoyed that part of it.
Can I just interject and ask, Dick, when you see the band today, or you hear that they're, as they recently did, performing in the Pearl Harbor Day Parade, or as they're going to do next year, playing in the Rose Parade, how do you feel about that? To be connected, to have been the first drum major, what are your thoughts or feelings about that?
I was here a few years ago for homecoming. As you know, our niece had 2 sons at school, and she said, you got to go to a football game. Well, we missed this one and didn't get that one. We wound up at homecoming, and the band came out of the dark through those, between the gym and the dressing area there, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. Nobody told me there was going to be this big a band, you know. And I think, frankly, I get choked up. It's very, very rewarding, especially when they call them to attention and they go, Apache. We started that 63 years ago. And, you know, to see that going on. We had our 60-year reunion of my class in October at the Embassy Suites by the railroad bridge. That's not 2nd Avenue, that's just called the railroad bridge. Anyway, we had that reunion over there, and I was able to take my phone and show some of the members of the band the beginning of a band review of like 2012, 2014, where the band does the same thing we did.
Yes.
And that is very, very rewarding.
So, Tammy, when you call the band to attention, to Apache, he started that.
Well, there were 4 guys that started it, and they sold it to the director. And I was telling Fred there was a maneuver we did for an about face where you throw your leg out. That didn't work. You know, nobody could do that right. But this other thing, the band director said, that's good, we like that. And it's fun to see that.
Yeah. I would say, you know, doing that, calling Apache after the drum major calls you to attention, I can vouch for the rest of the band members when they say it's what makes them feel the proudest to be an Apache and to be a marching band member. So I wanted to thank you for bringing that to us.
Well, we really appreciate it, and I know every band member that's seen it and heard it. If we were in between buildings, there was a place in Alhambra, they had us lined up on a side street, and we noticed there's some tall buildings. So in addition to yelling, we had the drums. We had a row of tenor drums, a row of snare drums, we had 2 bass drums. We had those guys really hit the drums hard, scared everybody. And but they knew we were in town.
Cool. Yeah.
Dick, do you have other things you'd like to share, either with Tammy or the whole band, or What about even the parents of the band students and the orchestra students?
Well, I have the parents listed right here. You know, that first trip to Washington, D.C., we were out of school, my class. And I think Richard Benson was the drum major that went with him.
Yes.
And to get the money, this friend of mine, Bill Black, his father was a naval aviator and was still in the reserves. And so he went down to the El Monte airport and rented an airplane and put loudspeakers on the side of it. And he crisscrossed Arcadia, you know, at the lowest altitude he could with the speakers, trying to get people to give money to get the band to go to Washington. And it worked. I don't know what else they did to raise money, but I know that worked. And that organization, the parents that did that, incorporated and became the Arcadia Music Club. That's the genesis of that. And I think the parents, you know, all the way from the beginning of the school, they had to lobby Sacramento themselves to get a unified school district, just to get a high school. And the parents that had youngsters in the Monrovia Arcadia Duarte High School band didn't want their younger kids to go over there. They wanted to have Arcadia have its own band. And that was a wonderful goal because that's how it happened. And of course, in the old days, MAD, the A in MAD furnished more musicians than Monrovia or Duarte. And that was important. And the orchestra, and I must say also, we had James Neumeister was the choral director here, and he was world famous. You know, the choral people really, really did well. And in fact, some of the students in my class became choral instructors.
Well, I hope with all those groups they'll make you proud.
Oh yeah, it does. You know, once in the Apache band, always in the Apache band. You know, I look at their drum line.
Yes.
And on YouTube, and it's fun. It's fun to be able to say, even at my age, you know, look back on that and say, you know, we started that thing.
That's right. So you started right out of the first year.
Yes.
And how old were you?
13. I'm 78 now.
I wasn't going to ask.
It's okay.
All right. Tammy, what do you think about meeting Mr. Jenkins?
This is something I've never dreamed of. As you can tell, I don't really know what to say. I'm kind of freaking out, but.
Well, what's nice about it is, I appreciate what you're saying, but you guys have worked so hard to make it better and make it more sophisticated. And, you know, I was back for a spaghetti dinner, I don't know, 30 years ago, I guess. One of my classmates had a daughter that was in the band. And the band director said, got to ask you a question. What color was the uniform? We can't tell, they're black and white. The photographs of the band are all black and white. And I said, well, they were red and gray pants with a red stripe. He said, we've been wondering about that for years. And then, of course, now you have these wonderful colored photographs. And,
Yes.
it's hard to tell, you know, with black and white.
Well, before the evening's over, Tammy will be in her uniform leading the band, and we hope to get a couple photographs of the two of you together.
Well, that'd be wonderful. That'd be wonderful. Yes, I missed this. Good thing I had notes.
This is kind of good.
I think the fact that Frank Largent saw this as more than just a marching band, it was a show. With those timpanis out front and the tom-tom girls behind us, the drill team. You know, we impressed people, and that was fun.
That's good. I think it's still fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a pleasure having you here with us tonight, and a pleasure to host you here. And Dick Jenkins, we thank you very much, not only for being our first drum major, but for being so generous with your stories and opportunity to visit with you here tonight. And for
I'm glad to do
us.
it. Very glad to do it.
Well, we're going to go on to spaghetti dinner, and we hope you have a great time.
I'm sure I will, and I got a lot of my family here. You know, Sherry, she's
Yes.
my niece. She rounds everybody up.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could we, I mean, Tammy can go if she needs to go, but could we talk a little bit more about the high school itself and not just the, I mean, the band's great, love the band, you know me, but if we could also do some.
Yeah, we started
And
down
we have
that
a little
track a little
time.
bit. I don't know if you need to go, we don't want to. Okay.
Really, really nice to meet you.
See you later. Nice meeting you.
Hope you enjoy the show tonight.
Yes, you'll see her a little later. So yeah, that's an opportunity since you're here and you were part of the founding class of the high school. And the band was an important part of the school then. But just founding the school, just being part of one of the first classes and the first students in, could you talk about that a little bit? What
Well,
was the school like?
it was half finished when we moved over here, on purpose. They purposely built half the school. The gym, the facilities for physical education were done. And one row of classrooms all the way down here. Now, El Mahdi Avenue used to come through, before the school was here, it would come all the way through to the street over here.
I see.
And they didn't take the pavement up. They left it there, but they blocked it off temporarily. The band and orchestra had a house on the other side of El Mahdi Avenue. And that's where we practiced, except for the drummers. Frank Largent, I said, you guys go outside.
So when you were in high school here, was it under construction?
No. Well, yes, the second half was. And they finished the second half within a year.
Oh, okay.
They were working on it. But we used El Mahdi Avenue, since it was blocked off, to measure off 30 inches and draw stripes on the street so we could get a 30-inch step. And anybody that didn't do it right, we tied their legs together with 30-inch rope. And, but the school itself was very, very forward in terms of its design. They always talk about the north-facing window. So you get sunlight, but you don't get a lot of sun. And there used to be small windows up on the other side. The inside of the school was all birch paneling.
Oh.
The dressing facilities for the gymnasium all had radiant heat in the floor.
Okay.
Very, very modern. It was considered one of the most modern schools around. And we appreciated that. I mean, there was a lot of pride. And the athletic guys, I played baseball one year. The athletic teams knew that they were competing. We won our first football game, freshman football. And the band, at the home games, the band would be there, and a coach would say, I've been coaching freshman football for years, but I've never seen a freshman team with their own band. And he said, well, they're all freshmen. And
The whole school's freshmen.
yeah, and we, as we progressed, you know, we played, when I played baseball, we only had a junior varsity.
Okay.
We didn't have a varsity yet. And, but the school itself, you know, the snack bar out here, I saw the snack bar when we were here in October. It's still there.
Yes.
And that's kind of fun to talk about because, you know, that goes back way, way back. And they used to have a drink called Apache Punch. And nobody liked it, but we all bought it.
Apache Punch.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the freshman class, my class, is we participated in statewide debate. We participated in all high school activities that we could. It didn't matter that we were only freshmen. You know,
So you got to do it all.
got to do it all. The people that were responsible for the administration of this school, when we were at First Avenue School, there were other kids there. There were 7th and 8th graders. We were separated, and they all had a speaker in the classroom. Well, they'd turn the speaker off for the 7th and 8th graders if they wanted to address us, because then the vice principal would say, attention all freshmen. And the other students could not hear. And we were treated that way especially. Interesting that boys' vice principal is Otto Remick, And he's been to every reunion we've had except the last one. He's in his 90s.
Ah,
And we've had, let me see, ten reunions.
okay. And you've gone to all 10?
Yeah.
You
There are the-
recommend it?
Well, this is a closely knit group. You know, I hear from my high school friends all the time. In fact, I had dinner with one last night.
All right, so you still stay in touch.
We all stay in touch. Our motto is, we were the first, we're still the best.
That's great. That's great. To the students at large at Arcadia High, you know, you've been part of the establishment of the school as a pioneer student here and everything. And obviously you're proud of them, and there's a lot of things going on that have just grown from what you saw start. But if you were to say one thing to all the students, what would you say?
Well, I'd say that the pride that we have as alumni and having been students here, it remains with you. It's not something you think about every day, but it remains with you. You know, you see some of the students around the country who are dissatisfied or have some kind of a grudge against the administration or something. That's never happened here. And, you know, they gave us a chance to learn.
Yes.
And most of us took it,
Okay.
you know, and ran with it. You know, our class is very successful. Worked hard, and I'm sure all the classes feel that they're the best,
Yes.
and they should. They should
Yes.
have pride in their class. But that would be my thought on it. They gave us an opportunity, and we didn't waste it.
That's great. That's great advice. Any other thoughts from the historian's point of view?
I don't think I have any.
Okay. Other suggestions? Okay.
I was a head deputy DA in Pomona. I had 4 deputy DAs that worked there that had gone to Arcadia.
Oh, in your office?
Yeah, in Pomona. You know, the office is a big office.
Yeah.
There's 1,080 deputy DAs, but you know, Pomona we had 27, 30 lawyers, and 4 of them had been to Arcadia.
Good.
And I had my Arcadia reunion coffee cup on my desk, and they come in and tease me about it.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think this is a pleasure to meet you in person and to chat more, and I hope we will continue this.
Thanks.
Enjoy talking with you. Thank you all. That was fun, Dick. And you'll get to see Tammy and a few of her friends.